Welcome to the weekly roundup of the proceedings at the TRRC. This week we had 4 witnesses whose testimonies focused mainly on the event of November 11th, 1994. First up on the witness's seat was a communications operator who was stationed at the Army headquarters in Banjul, thereby really placing him in the hub of communication traffic and also making him privy perhaps to certain crucial details. The next on the witness stand, or the witness seat rather, was one of Sanasable's orderlies, who apparently was present in many, if not all, of the catalogue of atrocities on civilians alleged to have been committed by Sanasable and his security entourage, yet this witness, incredibly, implausibly, saw nothing worse than the confiscation of the camera of a hapless photographer. He characterized Sanasable as honest, God-fearing and hard-working, yet elsewhere in his testimony he accused Sabally of lying. Indeed, his memory at crucial stages of the questioning went missing in action, leaving many gasping with incredulity. And the intrigue doesn't end there. Next, we had a witness who gave the first incident of an accidental killing. And the final witness of the week added more detail to the emerging horror picture of events of 11 November 1994. As usual, I am joined by my twin towers of information, our correspondents covering the proceedings. On my right, Babukar Sise, and on my left, Ansumana Eso Nyasi. Gentlemen, welcome to the weekly roundup.
Thank you.
Yes, so the first witness we had this week, he was called name Malang Kamara, isn't he? He was born in 1970 and he enlisted in 1991. So here, since the focus really is on November 11th, let's plunge straight into that. So where was he November 11th? Or perhaps we should start November 10th, because most of the events began really on November 10th.
Yes, indeed. Thank you once again, Mr. Mboj. And of course, my colleague here, Babukar Sise, as well. It's been an interesting week, and we had, very interesting testimonies, and some quite controversial for the most part. Malang FS Kamara, on the 10th of November 1994, was a private soldier, working under the communications department at the defense headquarters in Banjul. And he was on duties on that fateful day when he received a call from then Council Chairman Jame at around 8 p.m. Asking him whether they have been briefed. And then he answered in the negative, and that was when he said to him, "I'll get back to you." So he said he was there. Then came the second call around 10 p.m. When he gave him an instruction to pass on to his commander, who would, further pass on the instruction to other officers, that if he gave him a list of names of 8 officers, and most of them were lieutenants, except for Sergeant Jibril Say. You had the likes of Lieutenant Basiru Barrow, Lieutenant Dotfal, Lieutenant Bineminte,
and LF Jame, I think LF Jame was there.
Bakari Mane Nyancho, and others.
So there were about 8?
They were about 8. He gave him 8 names, and he said, if in the event they appear at the defense headquarters, wanting to forcefully, enter the premises, that he should pass on this instruction to his commander, that these men should be gone down, they should be shot at. So he said he went out, passed on the message to his immediate commander, who gathered all the men, and while he was gathering the men, he went back to the office. And at that point, he was trying to reach Lieutenant Bineminte on the phone, but he couldn't reach him because he said they had this close relationship and they were all from the same village. So, because initially he said the information that they received as of the morning of 10th November, because the army at the time were preparing for the Remembrance Day, which they were preparing to celebrate. He said the information they received at the time was that there were some, officers, who really were not showing any interest in taking part in these celebrations, and in fact were not showing up, in the preparations that they were doing at the time. So he thought maybe, just maybe, it's in relation to that. But when he received this order from the then chairman, he realized it was more than that.
And just before the order came in the evening, earlier on in the day, he realized that the council members had all gone to Yundum.
Yes.
So he got information as well from the radio operator, wasn't he? He was getting information from the radio operators first when they went to Yundum and afterwards when they went to Fajara. Yeah, so continue.
Yes, yes, you are very right. Because he works under the communications department at the defense headquarters, so he was privy to whatever was happening, within the force at the time, because that is where information is, that is where information is being disseminated.
I call it the hub of information traffic.
Exactly.
Yes.
So he received this information that council members, in fact, all of them except for the chairman, were at Yundum Barracks, that they were having a meeting with soldiers there. But he really at the time couldn't tell what the meeting was about, but he can confirm, or he could confirm at the time, that they were at the barracks at that particular moment.
Yes. So from there, what happened to him after that?
Yes.
After all of this information, this was on the 10th.
Yeah.
Yes, and right into the evening, then finally around 10 o'clock, he got that information from Jammeh, and then he had the list.
Yes.
He was given a list, and he relayed the information to the commander. And what happened?
Yes, he said they were there until around 12 a.m. when he had shots, around the combo end, because he was at the defense headquarters in Banjul at the time. He couldn't tell what exactly was happening, but he really could confirm that, shots were being fired. And it was until in the morning, when, of course, they were getting information, but they were quite sketchy at the time. It was difficult to really confirm what was happening. But then it was in the morning, when Jara came to him, Lawrence Jara came to him, and said that he wanted him to accompany him to.
He was an officer.
Yes, he was an officer.
Yes.
Actually, that he wanted him to accompany him to Yundum Barracks, where he was going to, and he said actually he was supposed to go home, but then he was instructed by a senior that you go with him to the barracks, to serve as his orderly, for that period, and then on your way back, you can branch off and go home. So they proceeded to Yundum Barracks, and he said upon arrival, there was so much commotion here and there, some of the council members were there, you had soldiers running, up and down.
Yes, things were helter-skelter.
Helter-skelter,
there's
that state of, confusion, the whole place was quite chaotic, like you put it. So that was when he saw some of the officers arrested actually in his presence. And I remember him saying over 20 officers were detained, in the guards room at the barracks.
Yes, and he also mentioned some of these names that we've been constantly hearing, names like Basiru Kamara, E.M. Sise, Jibril Sey. He said he saw them all arrested, didn't he? While he was there, stripped naked and all the rest of it. And then he also mentioned the members of the junta who were there and other similar, and other senior army officers. They were not necessarily members of the junta.
Yes.
And Mamadou Badji's name comes up again, doesn't it?
Yes, the current National Security Advisor's name came up again, and I also remember he mentioned Colonel Babukar Jatta as well, who was then, the head of the army, and he said they were all, present, at the barracks, and also in his testimony he said when he arrived at the barracks, he went, because of what he saw, he went to the cookhouse where he was, and he was there with, some officers. He said he peeped through the window and he saw officers climbing up a certain truck that was parked outside. They would climb up and then they would come down. But
yes, that's given the truck. We've been hearing about the parked truck. Yes. So quite a number of witnesses have.
And he said, given the expression, of, their facial expression, some of the soldiers who climbed up the truck, he also, began to get curious. He wanted to know what was going on, what was in the truck. So he climbed up the truck, and he said he saw Basiru Baro and Dotfal, lying lifelessly, in the truck.
Yes, as far as he was concerned, they were dead.
They were dead as far as he was concerned.
Yes, and he would also go on to
tell us. He did say Fal wasn't completely dead.
Fal was still.
He said Fal was still moving, his body. So, but not for Basiru, but Fal wasn't completely dead.
And we've heard that from Mafuji Sonko. Yes. We've heard that from Abdoulaye Dabo. So we've been hearing that regularly, that he wasn't completely dead.
Yes.
Okay. Then. So regarding the EMCC and Fafanyang, he tells us.
Yes, he said he, witnessed their killing, and I remember him saying that these are people he was very much used to. He knew them, prior to November 11, and he said he witnessed their killing. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And
apparently for Fafanyang, I mean, he explained. He said he had Edward say, "Go and join your friends."
Yes.
And then because of Dotfal and Basiru in the truck, so the moment he was going to climb, he climbed to look inside the truck. Then he was shot from behind, and then he fell and he died. According to him.
And he dies there. And doesn't he also tells us that somebody called Manlafi Kaur and Lamin Kuli
in fact
participated. We will discuss Lamin Kuli's testimony later on, but this was quite interesting as far as he was concerned. This witness, Lamin Kuli, participated in the killing of Fafanyang.
Yes, in fact, he also made a very disturbing revelation in his testimony, where he claimed that former Junta Vice Chairman Edward Singate, was the one who shot Fafanyang, as well as EMCC, that he participated in their killing. And I remember him also in his testimony, describing the manner in which they were killed. It was a very interesting testimony. He also named 2 other people who he alleged took part, in the killing of these officers. And interestingly, those 2 officers, also testified, just after his testimony, the following day and the day after. Yeah.
Okay, so he mentioned these 2.
These 2.
And these 2 testified.
Just a day after his testimony and the day, yes.
So how the 2 testimonies sort of, do they compare? How did the 2 testimonies compare?
Well, in his testimony, he sounded very confident, that these people really did participate, and he claimed to have witnessed them participate in the execution of these officers. But then we saw in their testimonies, these other 2 officers that he named that also testified, right after his testimony, JCB Mendy and Lamin Koli, who both denied, executing except for Lamin Koli, who said his weapon, had this accidental discharge, and as a result, fired the shot that ended the life of Fafanyang. He said it was accidental. He denied that, he intentionally took part in his execution. We also heard from JCB Mendy, who denied throughout his testimony as well.
We will come to their testimonies later. But he says something as well. He heard, was it the 14th of November? That was when some soldiers, including people like, was it Cadet Silla, and were taken to Nyambai Forest and Sifu. He also heard that, didn't he? That they were taken to Nyambai Forest and Sifu and executed. He wasn't there, but he heard. Yes. He heard that. So afterwards, he said he left the barracks maybe around 2 with Lawrence Jara. Then he left. What became of him, I wonder, in the end?
Well, in fact, I remember him also saying that at Union Barracks, Sana Sabali was the one in charge. He was the one issuing orders as to who should be arrested, who should be detained, what should happen to, whoever was in their custody at the time. That too, I think, was quite very, very significant as far as his testimony was concerned. And, he also went as far as really implicating council members in the execution of these officers, that they did participate.
Absolutely, and he said something. Babakar, you will come in here. You see, the reason why we are focusing on Sumana Eso Nyasi here, because he covered that particular witness's testimony. But here there's a more general point, because he also said something else. That was in July, on the 19th. He was bereaved, wasn't it? His father also had died in Guinea-Bissau. Yes. But his superiors wouldn't give him permit to go. Yeah. But Yahya Jammeh, a junior officer at the time, gave him the permit. So from all indication, from all testimonies, this is really somebody who was quite troublesome. He was always getting into trouble, and yet he could get away with it. Because imagine that, to have the audacity to do that.
Well, every coin have 2 sides, they say. And also, everyone has a good side. So for Yaya Jammeh, we've seen, you know, people saying he was stubborn, he was not obeying commands, he was this, he was that. But then again, I mean, common sense. The man is bereaved, the father died. Obviously, to give that person 1 day or 2 days off, and it's in a foreign land, Guinea-Bissau. I mean, I think that was a good thing to give. I think it was absolutely necessary for him to.
But again, he went against the command. There was a process in place that he had to follow. So in these things, particularly in the army, one cannot be sentimental, if I might call it that, even though perhaps what he did could be judged as being a good thing, yet it is a reflection of his character that he simply couldn't follow process.
Yes, it shouldn't have happened because I mean the protocols should have been followed. I mean, it was the leaders who have given that order for him to go. But again, as we see, Yaya Jammeh gave him the permit to go, and he went, he came, and nothing came out of it.
Similar pattern of intransigence.
I think he came back after the coup. That was when he came back. The coup happened in his absence. But for me, I mean, I think it was, despite the fact that, you know, Jammeh kind of disobeyed the command and went as far as taking up the responsibility to say, okay, whatever. In fact, I remember him saying that Jammeh said to him that whatever happens when you're back, I'll take the blame. You just go. If you look at it, I mean, another way, I think it was a good thing, given, I mean, the situation at the time. But again, I don't know what, I mean, the reasons really the command had at the time to deny him, you know, going to attend his father's burial. But he also was the first witness who told the commission that 10 officers were executed at the Brikama firing range.
Yes. So here then, I feel outnumbered.
But I like the final part of his testimony, where he said, I mean, vehemently that all those who committed crimes, he recommended that they should be brought to justice. He said they shouldn't be let scot-free, and also he pleaded that the fallen heroes, I mean, the officers who died and were buried in such a gruesome way that, I mean, the graves should be, you know, dug up and then they should be buried properly and civilizedly. He did make that recommendation.
Well, one imagines that all of that will happen, and the idea of prosecutions, I mean, naturally, the whole process of reconciliation and reparations, there will be some prosecutions, obviously. So one hopes that that sort of thing will happen. Now, I think we can move on to our next witness. He was popularly called JCB. His name John Charles Mendy. He was born in 1972. He also enlisted in 1991. So on November 11th, he was an orderly to Sana Sabali. Who's going to take us through his testimony here? Babukar, take us through JCB's testimony.
JCB Mendy is another character. And I said, as the week progresses and then more drama unfolds, you know, for him, first he said he was part of the coup d'etat. Obviously, he was with Sana and Jammeh and everybody until State House was taken. And then from there, he said he was then a few weeks later or a few days later, he was choosing to be the orderly to Sana Sabali. So which means this man is privy to everything that Sana Sabali is doing, you know, all the information. He's the one who was supposed to break the spell about Sana Sabali, but it didn't happen for some reason, you know. So, I mean, there is still, you know, some secrets that we still don't know. Yes, about Sana.
That's it. But on the 10th of November, he said he was with the vice chairman because he virtually, from the evidence that we gathered, he virtually lived with him. So he said in the morning he went to buy CDs, didn't he?
Yeah.
He went to the market to buy CDs. Take us on from there.
Yeah, he said he went to buy CDs, and then before he returned, I think he said before he returned, these guys have already left for Yundum Barracks.
Yes.
Then he arranged for transport and he followed them to Yundum Barracks. And he said because he was a junior soldier, he wasn't inside, you know, the hall. So he was sitting outside while the meeting was going on. But he said he could hear yelling and shouting, and it was Sana inside, you know. Then he said later on when they came out, and Sana told him, you know, that he has a list of people who wanted to stage a coup.
So this was when he came back, when he returned from buying his CDs. Yeah. So he was told that Sana and the entourage had gone to Yundum Barracks. So he followed them. He joined them at Yundum.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, exactly.
Yes, and then that's it. So all the yelling and all of that.
Yes, he said so. The meeting went on for like an hour or two, and then after the meeting, he said Sana told him that there are people who want to stage a coup, but if they go ahead, he will silence them.
Yes.
And
So he claimed that he didn't know anything about it prior to the meeting, but after the meeting, that was when he was apprised of the details
Yes.
by Sabali.
Indeed.
All right.
Indeed.
And then what happened?
And then he said after the
course of
meeting,
day?
he said they went home, and then when they left, they went home actually. So at home, they were there after lunch, relaxing, and then it was around 5, I think he said, 5 p.m., that Sana called them and said, let them all be prepared, be combat ready, he put it as. I mean, that means they have to be ready for war,
Yes.
you know, in a sense.
So
So
this was much more than just the camouflage. They had all sorts of battle gear that they had to
paraphernalias.
put in, the paraphernalia.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
you know, yeah, it was, and in fact, the consul was asking, what do you have? He said an AK-47, and then probably 3 reserve barrels, and, you know, he was describing how everybody was dressed and everybody was armed and prepared. And then before they left, he said, the junta members came there, except Yaya Jammeh again.
Yeah.
They came there, they went inside Sana's house and talk about something that he said he's not privy of, and then they came out and they said,
And they were all battle ready.
yes,
Weren't they? The
that's the
junta
word.
and their orderlies and the whole entourage, they were all battle ready.
Yes, they were all battle ready. And he said they first went to Banjul, you know, and then again he said the guys hold a meeting, the junta leaders, I mean, they hold a meeting there while they were waiting. And then when they finished was the time when they came down, and so he said Sana briefed them that we are going to foil a coup. There are some men who wanted to stage a coup, so we are going to Yundum Barak to foil a coup. And that's where he first, I mean, came up with the famous slogan, Billah wala Tallah. I think he's the one who
Yes.
mentioned as well that, you know, Jammeh swore, you know, and said if he had gone, you know, with them, you know, a lot of families will cry, according to him. You know.
And in fact, this was one of the first troublesome spots when the council asked him whether they were briefed about the mission. He kept quiet for a while. When the question was repeated, that was when he said that they were briefed, wasn't it? He was really a very difficult man. And then from there, what happened? In the end, we know that about 40 soldiers or so, when you put together, he said maybe 40, so they left for Yundum.
Yes, he said about 40 soldiers, and they left for Yundum. And then he said before just a few yards from or a few meters from the barracks, the first person they apprehended was AK Toure.
Yes, somebody called AK
Somebody
Toure.
called AK Toure. But then, according to him, when AK was apprehended, for some reason, it's kind of funny here why AK was apprehended, but they couldn't go with him to Yundum. But for some reason, Sana said, stay with him and
if he
take care
tries
of
to
him,
dodge, if he tries to dodge,
finish him.
finish him.
Yes.
Wasn't it? This was at the point that the late council came in again, because with him, there appeared to have been this gap
Yes.
between the oral testimony that he
in
was giving
conclusiveness.
and the written one he had given earlier.
Yeah.
So apparently earlier, he said that Sana said to him, finish him, which is completely different
Yes,
from if
what
he
he said
tries to dodge,
Yes.
finish him.
Yes.
So he adjusted his testimony.
Exactly,
there.
exactly.
And then what happened?
Well, he said for some reason, he said, which was a miracle, he said he let AK Toure go, telling him that if they ask you, tell them you escape. Don't let them know I let you go. So unless we hear from AK Toure what happened later, whether he escaped or whether he was let free by this man, I mean, we don't know.
That was one of the most implausible details, really, in his testimony. Even though the testimony was replete with all these kinds of contradiction. So, then what happened next?
Yeah, he said, and then he proceeded and met, you know, the council members at Yundum Barracks. But again, at that point, he said, Sana sent him. It was like issues where things will happen he wouldn't be aware of.
Yes.
Because first he was with AK Toure. He did not arrive with Sana and Co at the barracks, so he wouldn't know what happened there. And then again, the moment he arrived at the barracks, he said Sana instructed him to go and bring the then Army Commander Babukar Jatta. So obviously during that gap again, it's like he would not know what is happening at the barracks. So that's why he didn't go into details of people being arrested, people being locked up, people being put inside the truck. So it was all missing in his testimony because of, I mean, according to him, he was busy doing some errands. So he said he brought Babukar Jatta I mean, to the scene.
He brought, yes, he brought Babukar Jatta to the scene.
Yeah.
But let me just bring in Eso here. This is quite curious because we've heard a few testimonies that there was an ambush.
Yes.
Didn't you get the sense that perhaps this 40 that were battle ready, they were the ones that led the ambush?
Indeed. I mean, I think J.C.B. Mendy was kind of a hostile witness, you know, I would put it. You know, quite controversial testimony, you know. Like you say, really some of the things or facts he was trying to bring up really didn't add up to his initial statement. You realize that most of the questions that counsel was putting to him, I mean, he was giving answers like, I don't know, I can't recall, I wasn't there, you know. Regarding the ambush, now, first he said they were brief, all right? And he joined them, he joined the team. But he didn't tell us where he parted with the team. Except when he said when they met with A.K. Toure, and then he let A.K. Toure go, then he went to, I mean.
Then he went in and joined them.
But where exactly did he join them?
Where exactly did he join them?
And where were they at the time? Now, there are so many gaps, really, in his statement. I found it quite controversial, you know, because here's a witness whose name has been adversely mentioned by previous witnesses, and they've levied so many allegations against him, and his name has been connected to some of the, you know, most heinous atrocities that happened, you know, November 10th and 11th. So for him, really.
Perhaps even going until the 14th.
Until the 14th, exactly.
Yeah.
So I found his testimony quite controversial.
Absolutely. So now that's it. So you continue. So when he brought back Babukar Jatta, which was convenient in the sense that he could say that he didn't witness, he didn't take part in much of the killings and arrests and tortures that were going on. So when he brought back Babukar Jatta, what happened afterwards?
Well, he said when he brought Babukar Jatta, and then, you know, that place, according to his explanation, it was very short, you know, because it's like he didn't know what happened, he was away, and it was like, yes, there was a truck there, but, I mean, he didn't know what was in the truck, probably, you know, but there was a truck standing there, and immediately he said they left for Fajara Barracks, to go and attack Fajara Barracks.
But first he would tell us that, well, he was told that Barrow and Dot File were in the truck. Yes. But he didn't see anybody arrested.
Yes,
he didn't go to the guard room, he said.
Exactly.
He saw no one detained.
Yeah.
Nobody was beaten up. And all the rest of it. The only time actually he heard anything was when the truck began to move. Then he heard cries. That was when he heard that there were cries. Quite interesting. So he said they moved away from there.
Yes.
Then to Fajara Barracks,
yes.
didn't he? Then what happened at Fajara Barracks?
Well, at Fajara he was a bit, you know, he explained a little bit of their war tactics, you know, on entering the barracks, like going through the back gate. But again, he was in the front line again. According to him, he was guarding Babukar Jatta. He said he was close to Babukar Jatta. I mean, that's where they say when shots come in, they say lie down. But he said Babukar Jatta wasn't lying down.
Didn't. Yeah.
Exactly.
He said he ran and hid behind, was in a wall.
Interesting.
It was quite imaginative.
Yes,
man, I must
interesting.
say.
He said he was with Babukar Jatta, you know, trying to, in his word, he said safeguard. You know, that's what he was using, to safeguard him. Yeah. So he said he was with Babukar Jatta, but then again, he said they started firing, and then, you know, eventually the barracks was taken, and then they went inside again, you know. So then he didn't tell us how people were arrested there again. Then he mentioned, because he was still concentrating on Dotfal and Basiru Barrow.
Yes.
He said the men were paraded again.
Yes.
You know, when they asked them the names again, I mean, he couldn't recall the names. I think he mentioned even only 3. And then he said the men were paraded, and then at that point, you know, Sana said, I think that was the famous counting, 1, 2, 3, they fire.
Yes,
he didn't go in.
And even at that point, the lead counsel had to come in, because he was trying to conjure up a sense of chaos, and yet there was a tactical movement. Yeah. So when the lead counsel had to remind him, you mean tactical chaos? How might that look like?
Yeah.
that was quite interesting. So continue
yes,
with
and this is the first place where he confessed that he actually participated in the killing. I think the testimony went up to a point that obviously you just have to commit one crime and then, take, and get out of things, and that's it. And that was probably that was the logic. Let me just commit one crime and then move back, and then that was it. I didn't involve anything else.
Absolutely. In fact, afterwards, much of the discussions around town, people were saying that perhaps this was really the first time that the lead counsel had to work. Really, because this man's stalling and the stonewalling, so he had to go round and round and round to get him to admit to just one thing. And apparently, what he admitted to, he didn't do so in his written testimony. Yes. Let's just take a look at this clip, and then you'll see what we're talking about.
And what happened after he gave the order?
And the shooting started.
And who did the shooting?
Me, I am a part and parcel of them who did the shooting.
Mr. Witness, I am happy that you changed your story. When we met you all these days, you denied having ever participated in that.
In shooting?
Yes.
No, then it's an oversight on me. But this one, I am a part and parcel of who shoot.
Even in your statement here, you said, at this time I was at the back with then Army Commander Babukar Jatta, and I did not participate in shootings. So I'm happy that you
I'm sorry with that statement. I'm sorry with that statement.
Yes, so gentlemen, so here, for the first time, he admits to taking part in a killing. But then what? He said Babukar Jatta didn't. Didn't he say something like that? He said Babukar Jatta didn't.
Yes, he said Babukar Jatta didn't take part in the killings. But later on, again, we came to know through him that there is a relationship between him and Babukar Jatta, his father and Babukar's father, Then again, so if you put two and two together, probably you could guess, why he didn't bring Babukar Jatta into the picture. Just as he was painting Sana Sabali with a good brush, but at the end again, things flip around and then he said he's a liar again. Yes. So it's that kind of situation that we saw in this man. But then again, he said there was shooting, and then he actually, what I didn't understand is, you paraded people, a lot of people, even if at all it's 10, and you have a gun and said, fire. How would it be possible for only 2 to be killed at that spot, Mr. Mboj?
Yes.
And this was rampant firing, bullets raining on them. Obviously, how would only 2 people fall? What happened to the rest? It's interesting. But
only he can understand.
Only he can understand.
That is the $1 million.
But again, at that point where he said, when they asked him about Dotfal and Basiru Barrow, he said they were okay.
Yes, that's it. One of the
he said they were walking. He said they were walking on their feet.
Yes.
I think
the
he
only
mentioned
person who said that so far.
Yes.
That Dotfal was on his feet. They were tired.
Yes.
But limping.
Yes.
That was actually.
Yeah, but nobody was supporting them. And we heard from witnesses who said he carried them and put them into the lorry.
Yes, yes.
But he said they were walking.
Yes, which was quite curious.
You know what I'm really struggling to understand, or what I struggle to understand from his testimony, is how he was able to ascertain, to really confirm that Babukar Jatta and the other officers who were there didn't participate in the shooting. Remember, initially he told the commission in his testimony that when Sana gave the orders, all the officers who were present fired.
Yes.
That was when he was admitting that he also took part in the shooting.
Yeah.
But he said we all fired. And then he said Babukar Jatta didn't fire, and he was there. And remember, this was at night. So how was he able to ascertain this?
Yeah.
But he did say again that Dotfal and Basiru Barrow died at the same spot.
Yes, he mentioned that. Remember, he said that at first that there were 4 captives. He could see 4 captives and 1 escaped. Sir Jackal. Wasn't it? Sir Jackal escaped.
Yeah.
So with him, it was just 3 people dead, wasn't it? And that one escaped. So from there, he said they went to Radio Gambia.
Yes.
This was where the announcement that Sana, that infamous announcement of Sana Sabalis, even he said that was a lie.
That was a lie, yeah.
Even though he would characterize him later on that as an honest man. That was quite interesting.
Indeed.
So what do you think about that?
Well, it's true. I mean, he was defending Sana. We don't know for what reason. But at that point, obviously, he knew, I think even hearing from people, or he knew exactly that, what was said at the radio is not true, and he has to confess to say, definitely that wasn't the case, because there was no attack. It's attack from one area, not the coup didn't go ahead. Even if it was planned, it didn't happen. So that was it.
That's it. So when they were done, everything was done, they went back to Banjul, to State House, to brief the chairman and the jubilation. He said they were jubilating, but for him, of course not. His heart was heavy, so he just sat in the car.
Yes, he said. I remember him saying, there was jubilation all over the place. People were just eating and drinking here. They were all in a celebratory mood. He's the first witness, all right, whose testimony contradicted whatever previous witnesses have said in their testimonies. For the first time, especially with key incidents, the November 11 incident, and whatever happened in the days that followed, especially the execution of officers, at C4 and at the Brikama firing range. Really, his testimony was very, very controversial.
Yeah, Mr. Moj, about this jubilation thing, which I didn't even get it. It's like these people were trigger happy, and they killed and they were celebrating. At a point where, how would I put this? The blood of the dead is flowing with the tears of the living.
Yes.
At that point, we have people who are celebrating.
It tells you a lot about the people who had occupied our State House then. So from there, we move on to November 11. Sena's entourage, Edward, and all the rest of it going to Yundum, didn't he? And then there was an accident along the way. Didn't he say that? Yes, there was an accident and 3 people were injured. And then he had to take them to the hospital. And from there, he joined his colleagues in Yundum. So
yes, again, you see again, he was left behind again, according to him. And that hospital thing, he couldn't confirm who and who. And, he gave tough time to the lead counsel, to be honest with you. Because whatever he says would be either sketchy or blurry. So you just don't understand. And then again, he said, they went to the clinic, Fajikunda Hospital, received some treatment, and they were released. And then he went and joined them at Yundum again. That's where he saw a Land Rover. Again, it's like he wasn't there, but he found a Land Rover park.
They were detainees, and there was Alhaji Kanji. But he was quite willing to give us all the names, of course.
Yes.
There was Alhaji Kanji with the detainees, and then they all left for the forest. It's getting quite fascinating.
Yes.
And then he heard cries in the vehicle. Then he surmised that it might have been Say. Didn't he say that? Because he recognized the voice. Take us on from there.
There's something interesting here. He said at the Alhaji Kanyi was in the Land Rover. When they drove towards Brikama, he said at the end of the forest. I know other witnesses say at the beginning of the forest. That's where they turned. And this man said at the end of the forest. And at the end of the forest in Brikama, he said when they turned, they went like 400 meters inside. The vehicle stopped. And then he heard cries. When he came, it was Alhaji Kanyi. He alleged to have, been bayoneting these people with, this gun have a knife at the tip of it. And then he said Alhaji was actually bayoneting them. And then he said, he told Alhaji, hey, stop. You don't know the fate of these people yet. So don't do that to them. And he said it was Jibril Say who was actually crying at that point. But again, he said they came out and they left for C4. But the interesting thing about that point, Mr. Mboy, is that we heard of witnesses who said, like, about 2 trips were made. The first trip, they went to Brikama, allegedly killed, and then they came back, another trip to C4. Okay, but this man, he mentioned Brikama, they went into the forest, but he didn't say they were killed and they came back for more. For him, it's like, we went 300 meters, the vehicle stopped. I don't know why the vehicle stopped 300 meters. And also, when they stopped, nothing happened except Alhaji Kanyi's incident. And then they came back to the road again and started heading to C4. So that was interesting. What happened? Why did they turn into I think the lead counsel missed this one because they turned there and then they came out again. He didn't mention any killing at Brikama, even though they went into the forest. Why would they go into the forest and come out again when we heard from other witnesses that people were killed inside that forest?
But quite interestingly, later on, he would tell us that was very close to Alhaji Kanyi. Didn't they come from the same village?
They were very close friends.
What do you think of birds of the same feather? Let's move on. So they proceeded to C4. So on the way, this was quite curious as well. He said on the way, he said to Sana, why are we going to kill them?
Yes.
Why not prosecute them? This, I mean, that was also one of those implausible, really, stories. Really, he was telling us. Can you imagine at that point, given what we've heard so far, and how these people were like, the junta members, can one imagine him saying something like that to Sana Sabali?
Well, that assassin is as good as when they got to C4 and these people were lined up, and then he managed to excuse himself from them again. I mean, it's as good as that one, you know. So obviously, they go to C4 again. He said they went into the bush, and then again it was Sana, he said, who told these people to kneel down and say their last prayers, you know. And he said at that point, he managed and excused himself and got himself busy in one of the cars, you know, pretending to do something, just to not to be involved in the shootings. Mr. Boy, that part was very, very interesting.
This was quite characteristic of his testimony throughout. Let's just look at this other clip.
I was trying by all means not to participate in killing. I try all means, how will I dodge these things? Until before the shooting, I did manage to sneak from the group, get behind the vehicle, get into our vehicle, trying to do some things that to say that I am doing something whilst I didn't do something. I was just trying to dodge away from killing. By the time I left there, I had rapid gunfires.
Mr. Witness, how was the order given?
Shoot them and kill them.
And what followed immediately after that?
Shooting followed. Rapid shooting followed.
So at what stage did you have time to move from the shooting place to go to the vehicles to find something to do?
It was immediately after when they had their tete-a-tete and they moved back and said all of them are going to be executed. You're going to be killed.
No, remember, you said after the order was given, I left to go behind the vehicles to try to find something to do. Those were your words, correct?
I said when an order was given for them to be executed.
And what was the order?
Shoot all of them.
And what followed immediately after?
What followed immediately, everybody was preparing or taking a position.
Yes, and
then from there, that mingling of taking position is where I sneak and get into the vehicle.
But Mr. Witness?
Yes.
Did you fire your weapon?
No, I didn't fire my weapon.
Yes. So you've just seen that quite extraordinary, to say the least. Okay. So from there, what happened next?
From there again, he said they put the dead bodies into the car. He didn't mention if he participated in getting the dead bodies because he actually excused himself. So I don't know how they would notice that one oddly was missing, you know. But for some reason, he said the dead bodies were put into the car. And again, when they came back to Yundum Barracks, and when they got there, obviously the next stage is the burial. But he said he didn't take part in that burial as well.
But others would mention his name.
Yes, he said he didn't take part in the burial, but two witnesses came after him who said, yes, he was prominent in the burial, he was there, and they saw him. So it was interesting. You know, we learned that, you know, after that, Sana and Co went to watch a football match at the stadium. He said he didn't know about that football match.
Yes, I think that was the reason why the council asked him whether he went to the football match. He went to watch a football match. I think the council asked him. But he says something else as well, that EMCC was killed by Kanye. Didn't he?
Yes.
He said that EMCC was killed by Kanye, but interestingly, that bit was not also in the written statement. So with him throughout his testimony, the contradictions were just quite too much. And in the end, there was a remark I can never forget. He said that he wouldn't participate in what they were doing because he knew that day of reckoning would come. We knew that today would come. That was unbelievable. So anyway, from there, we move on to when he was an orderly. That was quite interesting, isn't it? Because there was a whole litany of accusations against Sana Sabali and his entourage on all the atrocities on civilians, particularly on the road. They took us through that as an orderly and all the stuff that they were doing.
Mr. Woj, at that time, 1994, I was in school. But obviously, you know, even in the village, I've got information about how Sana was recklessly driving around town and then getting all the traffic off the road and all this. I mean, I was getting that information even though I live, 100 kilometers away from the city. But then for him, it's again like whatever happens, because we got information, like the lead counsel was asking him about a woman being shot and then drivers being beaten. Remember the journalist, the photographer? You know.
Absolutely. The list goes on. Let's go through them one by one. There was somebody called John Jai.
Yes.
Wasn't it? This was New Joshua.
Yes.
So this was quite interesting because he said, wasn't he the first one there? He was there, but he wasn't sure whether John Jai was beaten up or not. Surely.
Yes. You realize that with most of these incidents, you know, as far as Sana's security details concerned at the time, his entourage, he would claim to be the first to arrive at the scene. He'll be the first to apprehend these civilians, but he cannot recall whether they were beaten or not, except for the guy at Lamen, who he said, after he arrived at the scene, you know, he looked rough, his clothes were torn, you know, but he couldn't tell whether he was beaten or not. And I found these two, you know, quite controversial. Really.
Absolutely. But the Lamin one, that was the Abuko one in 1995. So they chased him to Lamin. So, and when they caught up with him, he said they sort of roughed him up a bit.
Yes.
He wouldn't get into the details.
No, he just said, looking at him, you could see he was handled rough.
Yes.
But that rough was, how did he become rough? He said he was in there.
That's Tikani.
Couldn't tell.
The person was called Tikani.
Tikani,
That was the Tikani fellow. And there was the other one. Was it Mandinari? Was it Duloba?
Yes.
Still that one as well. There was a Duloba incident, and even that as well. Nothing really happened there.
No, the guy. Wherever something serious happened, he suffers from amnesia, Mr. Boj.
Yes.
So that's what I would say. He has a problem of amnesia. You know, if not deliberate, then it must be amnesia, because whatever something happened, and is serious, he's not aware of it. So that was the first place where we should have learned Sana's character. You know, before November 11th, how Sana was behaving in town, that everybody was saying in the Gambia that Sana was running around like a headless chicken and doing all sorts of things. And this man was there with him along all the way. And sometimes you will say, I was even with Sana in the same car. You know, he must be his right hand. But with all that, he couldn't see anything.
Absolutely. And he also made the startling remark that he had never visited Mile 2 at night with Sana. When so many different testimonies have said that they used to go there, the junta members with their orderlies used to go there at night to do their tortures and all the rest of it. But apparently with him, such a thing never happened.
Yes.
We know if you are, you know, Secretary of State, you know, senior government official, and you have an orderly attached to you, obviously wherever you go to, you have your orderly with you. So really, for some reason, I just don't understand how Sana would be out with other council members, and him being his orderly, very close to him, wouldn't be with him. How he wouldn't, you know, I don't know, but really it's hard to understand, you know, how he wouldn't be present when these things are happening. Yeah. He is his orderly, very close to him, wherever he goes to, they are together, but he wouldn't be able to tell if really these things have happened.
He even admitted as such, because really they virtually live together.
Yes.
So that just to tell you how close they were.
At Mile 2, interestingly, when the lead counsel asked him about OJ's issue, did he touch OJ?
That 5th or 6th September 1994?
Yes.
You know, I think OJ mentioned him.
Yes.
Mentioned his name.
That's why
that he was one of the torturers.
That's why they asked him.
He said he wasn't there.
Well, No, at mile 2 he said he was there.
Yeah, but on the 5th and 6th,
Yes.
he wasn't there.
Yes.
But on another occasion,
He was there.
But on that
And when he was there, you
notorious
know what
night,
happened? When they asked him, do you torture OJ? You know how he put it? Yeah. He said, when they told everybody to crawl or to do something, and OJ said he's not going to do it. And then he said he went to OJ because he wants OJ to do it. Because OJ refused, he wanted to help OJ. And then again, because of that, he said he went to OJ and pushed him aside and told OJ, please do it. If you don't do this and that. And then eventually OJ did it. He said he was actually, I mean, it's like I wish OJ could come back and clarify this point again. Because at that nick of time, why would he help OJ? What came to his mind that he was helping OJ and then he has to go and push OJ? Where were the junta members looking until he had the time to push OJ aside and speak to him to say, do that or do this or else this will happen to you? It's again another story.
So apparently his act of charity, he was just pushing him, trying to make him do it.
Yes.
That was his act of charity.
I will call it mercy pushing.
No, but remember, OJ in his testimony did say, that JCB Mendy was the first to hit him. Remember, on that occasion, he was the first to hit him. Now, in fact, that was put to him by the lead counsel, and he was like, well, maybe OJ would see it as torture, but I was just pushing him, so I would talk to him.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. It's all unfolding. So we move on to Sana's child's naming ceremony. Wasn't it? This was where they beat up, wasn't it, the cameraman? But to him, he wasn't really beating him up at all.
He said the man came there taking photographs without permission. And when Sana said, again, get him, he said he was the first to get to the man. But even though he was the first to get to the man, he said the only thing he did was grab the camera and destroy the film, And then at that point again, when he was quizzed about whether, the man was beaten, it was another thing again, Mr. Boyd. The man couldn't remember if the man was beaten or whether he wasn't beaten. He said there's a lot of crowd. So I wonder if all those because he said 3 of them rose on the man. So if 3 would rose on the man, then later on he said there was a big crowd. Is it that all the crowd who came to attend the naming ceremony pounced on the man, or how comes? So again,
and remember the guy that was detained at Trrc Round Up police station, who he said Sana gave him instructions to go and bring the guy from Trrc Round Up police stations. They accused the man of being the one who would enter those Gamtel telephone booths and be calling the chairman and
the prank calls.
Yes, the prank calls, insulting him and all of that. And that Sana also gave them orders to torture this man. So that was also the first time he admitted to participating in torture.
Yes, and when all was said and done, at some point he was arrested, but he didn't hear anything, didn't see any torture. But it was quite interesting that he said, was it Barakatu Koli, Sana's wife, was tortured. That was the only torture he heard. How very convenient that was the only one he heard at NIA.
Yeah, torture on the opposite side anyway.
Yes.
But the man started talking, flowing uninterrupted without any mistake when it came to him being arrested on that Monday morning. Yes. That when he started flowing. So he started remembering everything. The loss of memory disappeared. So everything was coming. No, he was very, very eloquent in that aspect. He was talking. And the lead counsel even told him.
Yes,
he said,
and really not to talk of his luck. He said he was locked up for 641 days, but never tortured.
Never tortured.
Some are lucky. The only exception so far from what we had. Enough of JCB. let's move on quickly to our next witness, who was it Koli?
Yes.
Amin Koli.
Yes.
The one who said that he accidentally shot
Fafa
Nyang. That was interesting.
Yes.
Yes,
I covered it.
So this was at Yundum.
This was
the key thing that he said.
Yes.
That he accidentally shot him. Where was he? The army medic.
Yeah, Lamin Koli is warrant officer class 2, the army medic.
Yes.
Interesting about him as well. Because again, the death of Fafa Nyang is too controversial, Mr. Mboj. There are a lot of issues coming up. Some will say it's Kanye who killed him, some will say it's Koli, some will say it's Edward who shot him. So, but then again, this is a man who came out to confess that he's the one who killed Fafa Nyang.
Yes, even though others have implicated it.
Yes.
Implicated him in taking part in the murder.
Yes.
For others.
Exactly. So the man again said, he started with 21st. He knows everything like 21st November, not November. when Jawara was coming 21st.
Yes, that was 21st July. Yes.
He said his preview of,
And
I mean,
orders.
the junta, some of them been disarmed at the airport. Again, you know, at on November 11th, during the meeting, I mean,
Yes.
he could eavesdrop.
And here,
You know,
so
and
he doesn't really provide anything new. Perhaps one other piece of detail that I found quite interesting was when he said Sana was furious. He was behaving like what, a wild bushfire. That was an interesting imagery. So finally, to the final witness we had was Babukar Sanyang. He provided a lot of details, didn't he?
Mm-hmm. Yes,
I covered. Let's just go. Let's just pick one or two salient points that he said, the new stuff that he would add on to what we know already.
Yes, his testimony actually focused on two key incidents. One, the November 11 incident, wherein he went on to name Kohli, who we've just discussed, as one of the, as well as JCB Mendy, as two of, you know, men from his command who joined orderlies, of council members to, do the burial of officers who were executed. And also, the other part of his testimony focused on his victimization, you know, when he was arrested and he also went on to name people like General Alaji Martin, who is still in the service, you know, of being the one who coordinated and participated in his torture while he was in detention. So his testimony focused mainly on these two incidents.
Yes, and he would also tell us that he would hear, or he heard Sana on the phone going, yes sir, yes sir,
yes sir,
yes sir. And then some minutes later there were gunshots and all the rest of it. And now I think we've managed to link where that yes sir was coming from, the vice chairman. Who else could the vice chairman call yes sir? Then of course the chairman. Final words, we've come to the end now. What do you think? How are the unfoldings?
I think this week, really, when we had the testimony of Kanyi and Mafuji, you know, we thought, you know, they would be the most, you know, interesting testimonies that we will hear. But I think JCB's testimony, you know, as well as that of Kohli, has also given us a different dimension. And, you know, different issues are really coming up now, and the picture is becoming clearer, you know, by the week. But again, if you look at the message that, you know, we're getting from these witnesses, you know, at the end of their testimonies, really, I think, like I say every week, like I would say, we have so many lessons we can draw from what happened, you know, things that were happening in this country by those who were at the echelons of power, you know, from 94, between 94 and 95, you know, I think these are things that Gambians really should learn from.
Just quickly.
Well, for me this week, it's all about JCB Mendy and Kohli. For Mendy, I don't know, I cannot recall, if you say so interesting, you know, hidden information, you know, people wondering what's going on, you know, questions not being answered properly. For Kohli, it's like, okay, your gun, the bullet from your gun killed Fafanyang. How did it happen? You are standing down, someone shot first, lying on the floor. How comes your gun was able to aim right, you know, at his head? So it's interesting, and you said, I mean, it wasn't your fault. A medic, you want to go and help somebody who was actually shot and probably will be killed. Why take all the risk and all the danger? But it's still not your fault. So it's interesting. He said he wasn't at the burial. Mendy said he wasn't at the burial, and the witnesses that came afterwards said both of them were there at the burial.
Yes.
But then your guess is as good as mine.
Yes, quite extraordinary. For the medic, should have had his first aid kit. Instead, he had a gun with him. Thank you very much, gentlemen. We've come to the very end of the TRC weekly roundup. I mean, as the testimonies are unfolding now, who would have thought that the Smiling Coast had such a nasty underbelly? But still, we must resist the impulse for revenge or anything like that. This is the time to be mature and just follow what's going on at the TRRC so that we can get the right understanding and put in the right structures so that such things will not happen again. Thank you very much, viewers, and to listeners on Q Radio 103.3. Hope that you'll join us next week. Ta-ta.